Right, so in my introduction, I just want to sort of start by giving an outline of my experience because, essentially that informs my perspective on the current Endangered Species Act. And sort of as was mentioned, I'm a wildlife biologist. I work as a consultant, and I've got extensive experience with the mining sector, largely with dealing with caribou, woodland caribou, and mining projects. I've also done a lot of work with the federal government, Department of National Defense, and Public Works and Government Services Canada to do sort of species at risk plans for several of their properties. And more recently, I've been involved in a very large project with several species at risk down in Windsor, the Windsor-Essex Parkway, and Barb and Joel will actually be speaking extensively on this project in the next discussion. So I'm not going to try to steal too much of their thunder. I might steal a little bit, but I'll leave some of the information to them. And just before I go ahead, I just want to plug consultants a little bit because I was listening to some of these talks before, and everyone has their little sectors that are represented here, and governments represented, and NGOs, and consultants really work with everybody. And I essentially view us. We work collaboratively with government and industry to do effects assessments and monitoring plans and management plans, and I think that sort of provides us with a unique perspective because as a biologist, I'm very personally involved in wanting to protect species at risk. I didn't spend, decades in school to, I've essentially dedicated my career to doing that. But I work with industry, and so I understand sort of the practical challenges associated with some of these conflicts that can arise with dealing with species at risk and development. And ultimately, it is our job as consultants to sort of come up with creative solutions to these complex problems. So there's my little plug to all the consultants in the audience. Oh, sorry. So I'm going to spend some time. I want to spend more time talking about opportunities and challenges. And I will spend some time, I think, talking about at the very end about some of the challenges I think we face under the current Endangered Species Act. But I'm going to start off with the positive because I think there's a lot of positive things to focus on. And as has been discussed in several of the talks, the permits require a lot of monitoring, and because of that, it provides a lot of opportunities to collect a lot of really great data on species that haven't had a lot of research done on them. Dr. Bogart pointed out that he doesn't really like to work on them. They're rare. So, who wants to work on something that's rare? And that means that at times there's not a lot of data on these species. So, these permits provide a tool to sort of get some, never mind sort of project impacts, they actually provide a tool to get some very basic biological information about these species. And just two projects that I've been sort of intimately involved in that sort of showcase this, the Caribou Monitoring Program that De Beers, Canada initiated up in the James Bay lowland back in 2004. To date, they've been monitoring this population for over 10 years. There's over 40 animals that have been collared. This program was initiated before the province initiated their current caribou monitoring program. So, data from that, has been very helpful in providing ideas, core use areas, site fidelity, calving areas, movement dynamics. And so it's just provided very great, data on a region that had not, no one knew anything about at the time to that level of detail. Another project, the Windsor-Essex Parkway. There's a huge, comprehensive, long-term monitoring program going on down there for over 8 species at risk. To date, we are monitoring over 1,000 snakes, some of which, the endangered fox snake and the endangered Butler's garter snake, they're being radio tracked every day. There's a huge mark recapture program going on adjacent to the project and outside the project. So huge opportunities to find out more about these species that, at times we don't know a lot about. And as has been pointed out in some of the other talks, and I absolutely agree, we need to assess whether these mitigation strategies and management strategies are any good. And these projects provide an opportunity to do that. So a lot of times, you'll see the same sort of mitigation strategies thrown out in an EA, and we think they work, but often, sometimes you do follow-up monitoring, but sometimes you don't. And under the permit, or at least the permits that I've been involved in under the Endangered Species Act, you have to assess the effectiveness of your mitigation strategies. And if we don't do that, we don't know if we should keep doing them or not. So I would agree. I think that that's a great opportunity that we should continue to focus on to better inform future management mitigation strategies. And I've just highlighted some of the responses that you can look at with some of this data: responses to disturbance, relocations, salvage, response to restoration efforts, responses to just basic, how do they respond to barrier fencing, netting, timing windows, salvage techniques. And we need to use that information to continually improve things. I was interested to see in a previous talk, they had success with using a sniffer dog to find wood turtles. And we tried the same thing. We had this dog called Ozone, and to sniff out snakes down on the Windsor-Essex Parkway. And I'm not sure if it's because we found our dog in a bar, which is true. We did find this dog in a bar. It was being used to sniff out coolants on refrigerators or something, and we thought, oh, perfect, we're going to train this dog to, sniff out snakes. She was very good at finding snakes that were stressed out, not very good at finding snakes that were not stressed out. So, I think that some of our information, perhaps from the folks doing the work with the wood turtles, probably would have helped us out in that endeavor. We had to retire her last year, but maybe we should have given her another shot with some collaboration with other sniffer dogs in the area. Under this economy, there's something like 99% of dogs are currently underemployed. So let's think about them too. The other, and I know there's been some discussion on, habitat compensation. Is it good? Is it bad? Should we avoid it? I think, aside from some of those discussions, essentially when you impact a hectare of habitat under a project, typically you have to compensate for it in a 3-to-1 to a 5-to-1 ratio. So there's an opportunity there. You can either purchase high-quality habitats that may not have long-term protection, or you can acquire, I keep forgetting to switch sorry. You can either, purchase high-quality habitat and protect it in perpetuity, or you can restore sort of marginal habitat that probably used to be really great but has been disturbed and could use a little tender, loving care, and you can restore it to its former glory. Either way, you are increasing habitat that can be available for species. Under all of these agreements, there is long-term protection for that habitat that might not have been in place, before. The other thing I want to highlight here is this collaboration, another main theme from what I've seen from the talks today. I totally agree. These permits provide tools for collaboration across conservation authorities, First Nations communities, NGOs, municipalities, and it's very easy to collaborate on these restoration initiatives and compensation measures through these permits. And I think that should continue to be a focus, because I think it's a very positive thing that can come out of these projects. So just some of the challenges, and it's challenging to have species at risk in proximity to a project. I mean, there's inherent conflict there, and so I think we can do better at some things, and but not everyone is going to get what they want. And I think that's, from what I gauged today, I think sort of everyone has that same level of expectation. Consistency, a few other people have mentioned this. I agree. I think we need to try to strengthen the consistency in data collection methods, permit requirements, and follow-up monitoring. And I think this will also add to, in a decade from now, when we have all this data, someone who's really intelligent should do a meta-analysis and take a look at, what's been working and what hasn't been working. But you need some consistency for that. Adaptability. So I want to talk to the adaptability about using a very specific example here. is everyone familiar with how snakes mate? That is a snake mating ball. And last year, it was late February, and if everyone remembers, the spring was really early, and we kept hearing these reports of these snake balls. All the construction workers were talking about these snake balls, and we had just started our monitoring effort, in early March. And so upon further investigation, it turns out that last year, because the spring was so early, everything was bumped up almost a month, which, given our windows under the permit, sort of mucked things up a bit because we needed to install mitigation fencing before a certain date. And the reason that was crafted that way was to avoid impacts to snakes. But while they're mating, if you put a barrier up, that they don't like that. They can't find each other. So we had to come up with, using current data, a way to problem solve at that time. How are we going to deal with, these snakes mating very early? And people could get a bit upset on the site. You'd walk around and all the construction workers are mumbling about these snake balls, wrecking everything. And so, we were able to work with M&R and come to a solution, essentially, which is just consistent monitoring. We found out that largely there was sort of a time period where they were doing it a bit more frequently, and then it sort of died off, and we were able to put the fence up at that time with minimal sort of impacts to the species. But that's some of that flexibility that's necessary in permit implementation. Another thing I see as a challenge is I think we need to get away from the species-specific approach. I think we need to sort of focus more on an ecosystem level. I think there's some efficiencies to be gained there, and which a few other folks have talked about today. And really, more importantly, I think we need to be thinking about scale. And I think that, with respect to effects assessments and monitoring and even coming up with compensation plans, we really need to be tying some of these permit implementation factors into a larger regional plan for the area. Doing it project by project is not necessarily going to meet overall goals for a particular species, and it will also provide more efficiency for developers as well. So essentially, just to summarize, as has been mentioned before as well, industry needs clarity in application and expectations. I mean, there's a lot of messiness, Justina mentioned it this morning, there's a lot of messiness with biology. But people who are developing projects, they need some level of expectation and clarity with how these things can move ahead. So we need to sort of try to control the messiness a bit, and I think adaptive management is a way to do that. And all the sectors that I have worked with have been very supportive of species at risk, but we just need to be sort of sensitive to what they need to deal with as well on some of these projects, and they have a lot of things to worry about. Species at risk is one of them. I think, and as I mentioned, I think adaptive management is sort of the key of that, and continuous monitoring is important, as well as open and collaborative relationships with all the stakeholders to sort of make these positive outcomes occur. And as far as sort of looking ahead to the modernization of the Act, I understand there is a need to be more streamlined. I am concerned, though, that a balance needs to be struck with streamlining and also the use of local knowledge. So, it's important to, in particular, when you're coming up with these monitoring plans, I think that you need to take into consideration local knowledge with the local conservation authorities and local Ministry of Natural Resources, and everyone sort of needs to be doing the same approach. Otherwise, we are losing our ability to sort of assess at a broader scale what works and what does not. And as I mentioned, I think permit implementation should take into account sort of more regionally based plans. And some sectors would fit into this a bit more easily than others. I work a lot with the Ontario Mining Association. Mines need to be developed where the deposit is. But when I spoke with them about, sort of this idea, they were very open to working collaboratively with other sectors to make this happen and make the permit process more efficient. So I do think that developers are very open to some of these initiatives. I think we just need to take some leadership on it. And essentially, we've also talked about database, and there's going to be this new database on the M&R website that has, distribution of species and abundance, and I think that's great. But I also think that we need to be developing a collective project database in order to assess mitigation strategies and what works and what doesn't at a broader scale. Not just species distribution, also mitigation. So let's not forget about that. Yeah, so thank you, that's all I have for now.